All right. I have a message that says the Hangout on Air is live. So hopefully I'm talking to more than just you. There we go. That's the live icon I was working on. Hi to everyone on YouTube. It's Mike from Go Sell From Repair. And today I have another guest. We have Matt Ham from, actually, I just was looking at your logo there. Let me get you on the screen. Matt runs a number of computer and phone repair stores. He can tell you much better about it than I can. So Matt, first of all, thanks for coming on. I understand that time is money. So the fact that you took some time out of your day to talk to me is awesome. Matt's also coming to us from Hawaii, which, yes, I know everyone says, oh, yeah, look at me, I'm in Hawaii. You know, that's usually the reaction that that people have. But Matt, by all means, let's get this rolling and tell us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And first of all, Mike, I appreciate you having me. It's good to be here. Good to be talking and chatting with you. And that's absolutely the reaction that I get when I tell people I'm in Hawaii. It's I think I get a lot of wide eyes and I'll go, ooh, Hawaii, that sounds like a great place to be. And it certainly is. So I'm here for only a year, so I'm trying to make the most of it. But no, so my company is Computer Repair Doctor. As the name implies, we fix computers, but in addition to computers, we fix phones, we fix tablets. We're kind of a break-fix shop that does it all, similar to a lot of in the repair industry. So we go at it from a computer first, phone second point of view, because in our point of view, if you can fix a computer, you can fix a phone. Computers are a lot more difficult when you have to factor in diagnostics and things of that sort. But yeah, we have 8 locations across the East Coast. We're in North Carolina, South Carolina, we're in Florida. We're in Louisiana. We opened a store in Cleveland, so we're kind of spread out throughout the East Coast. But yeah, we're happy to be here and chatting about phone repair, computer repair, and everything of that sort.
Awesome. Well, hey, it's great to have you. And hello to the chat. I can't read that name. That's in a different language, but hi, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about phones, computers, and repair and everything related. And just going back real quick to the Hawaii thing, I do have one question for, because you've got a long flight. You're coming from the East Coast all the way out to Hawaii. That's like, what, 2/3 of the way around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. My sister's wedding was about 2 weekends ago, so I flew home to North Carolina, and I think that was about 4,500 miles.
Wow.
I'm about as far from California as California is from the East Coast, so it's a sizable distance there.
Jeez. All right. Well, I do want to jump into the tech discussion. Caesar, good to see you here. But I have one more question, and I ask this to everyone who has lived in Hawaii or lives in Hawaii, and it's not related to phone repairs, but people always say that when you live in Hawaii, eventually you get tired of it. There's island fever. It's like you miss the mainland, and I only got to spend about 5 days there, so I can't really speak. But do you feel the same way after a year in Hawaii? Is it time to go home at that point?
So I've been here about 5 months, and I think it's a little different because when I moved here, I knew I was only coming for a year. And if I start going too much on Hawaii, you let me know because I could probably take up your whole live stream and then some. But no, I've absolutely loved it. I'm the type who likes to move around. You know, I don't have too much attachments that I always need to get home and get back to. You know, I love it here. I do hikes. We check out the beaches. So I think island fever is kind of a real thing. You know, it's hard to get from place to place, but I don't think I'm anywhere close to catching that disease yet. I think I'm still pretty island fever in a good way. Loving the beaches, loving the sun, loving the paddleboard and surfing, as you can tell. We were out in the surfboard and the bonsai pipeline this past weekend, me trying to not fall on my face as much as I usually do. But it's a great place to be for a year.
Man, that is awesome. Hello, Cito. Ito. Okay, so here's the thing. Matt is coming from a position where he's obviously stated not just phone repair, but also computer repairs. Before we got the chat going, one thing that we kind of talked about was how repair is leaning more towards phones and less towards computers, which, you know, makes sense to me because I don't often carry my computer around. So the chances of it falling onto the asphalt or, you know, into the toilet or anything like that are much less serious. But you said that right now, it's when it comes to repairs, it's about 50-50 on phones and computers.
Yeah, so for our company personally, we do about 50-50. So it depends on the store. Some of our stores lean heavier in favor of phones, especially stores that are in college markets or in markets with a large amount of young people. And then we also have stores that lean much more heavily in terms of computer repairs. So it varies depending on the demographic where we're surrounded. I would say that this industry, the repair industry in general, is much more focused around cell phone repair just because of the prevalence of phones, the prevalence of broken screens, the ease in which they can be set up and repaired. And I think that, the more portable a device is, the more often it breaks. We fix many more laptops than we do desktops for a good reason. Your desktop sits on the floor, it doesn't move. It's hard to damage that too often. Whereas a laptop, it's mobile. You take it around, and a cell phone is ultra mobile, right? And so I think those levels of portability definitely affect the level of damage that can occur to the device, among many other factors that affect the prevalence of smartphone versus computer repairs. So,
Right.
yeah.
That's Harvey. Good to see you here. So Harvey is one of our regular participants. He has a question for you. Did you have Trump anxiety living in Hawaii?
Well, I'll tell you, it makes me certainly follow the North Korean missile launches in a little more detail than I used to, knowing that we're the one that are in easy range of getting hit. But I won't go into politics. It depends on who you're following, who you're trying to get into, whether or not Trump is escalating that or making the right play. But obviously, the North Korea situation is a pretty serious situation. In addition to Hawaii, the West Coast is starting to feel the pressure with some of these launches. But yeah, I mean, they could absolutely hit us if they wanted to, and that's a little bit of a scary thing. But hey, it's the world we live in, so
that's true.
Not going to discourage me from living while I'm living. So
yeah, most definitely. Okay, so one of the things that I have. Oh, quick question.
Sure.
Personally speaking, Mac or PC, or both?
So I guess I'll say both, only because I use Windows, but right now I own a Mac. So I have a 13-inch Retina, but I actually don't even use the Mac OS on it. I just have, I think, Windows 10 installed on it right now. But honestly, I use my desktop for work. I almost never use my laptop. So I'm an iPhone guy all the way. I got the 10. I'm one of those sheep who just buys the new version every time it comes out, I'll be honest. But I like a little of both. I think I like the hardware of a Mac, but I think I like the PC OS. So
okay, cool. Just always curious about that, because I resisted Apple for the longest time. It was so difficult to do, I guess, what I was used to doing. A lot of people had told me, oh, give them a chance. And, I'm clicking on the right side of the mouse and I want to click left, and everything seemed backwards and counterintuitive. And they always said, well, compared to what? Well, obviously compared to what I have been using. So I gave it a chance, and I do appreciate the ergonomics, the battery lifetime. Final Cut Pro is awesome, some of the apps, but I still have to have a PC, especially for a lot of the work that we do. If you don't have a Windows computer, there's just some things that you can't do, period.
Yep, absolutely. Mac's great for video editing. Mac and Apple in general makes everything just work well together. I mean, honestly, that's why I like my iPhone. It's not what it can do, but it's how it does it. It's that usability feature that Apple just does so well. So, yeah, but you're absolutely right. In terms of computers, Apple may have a good usable OS, but it's hard to beat that history that the PC has and all the apps. And it's, at the end of the day, it's just kind of what you're used to and what you need to be doing. So I could go either way, but I use a little both.
If only the two could just play well together. Wouldn't that be great? Hey, yeah. Beha, how's it going? So we have Beha. He is also a business owner, is running one or several repair stores at this point also. Matt, I think that one of the questions that a lot of people come to me with that you can probably give us some insight on beyond what I know is when it comes to data recovery. And this is the thing that, you really can't put a price on it. A lot of people have questions about recovering data off of old hard drives, computers that got wet, things that just quit on them. And if someone came to you and said, hey, I've got, I know it's hard to answer this without the specifics, but typically what's the procedure? We know that if you have a phone and you delete something on accident, don't take any more pictures, don't add any more media on there, because you typically will overwrite that information and cause all sorts of other kind of problems. if someone's trying to recover data from an old computer or hard drive, what kind of advice do you give them?
Yeah, so data recovery. Data recovery is obviously one of those massive industries these days. And one of the things that you said stuck out to me, it's, you can't put a price on data recovery. Well, unfortunately you can, and a lot of companies have learned that. So my first experience with independent computer repair shops was in New York. And we worked with a few data recovery companies in the area. And it was very routine to charge $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 for maybe a RAID system recovery up there, or rebuilding PST files, or doing head swaps on laptop drives, right? Data recovery is a huge industry. I think with the advent of cloud-based systems and how it's gotten pushed into mainstream more, I think there's much less of a need for it these days. But there's multiple tiers of data recovery. So to start answering your question, it all depends on what type of data recovery the user needs. For example, there's a huge difference between, my laptop doesn't turn on anymore, can I get my data off of it, versus, hey, my external drive started clicking and I'm a photographer and I need my last 3 weddings that I have to get these pictures out, right? So data recovery comes in tiers. Tier 1 we usually just describe as like data transfers. It's pretty simple, straightforward. So your computer dies, it crashes, but the hard drive itself is fine. The procedure for that is you can typically just take the drive out, hook it up to an external enclosure or through any kind of adapter you might use. It's probably going to be different for an individual user versus what a shop would do, but you can pull the data straight off. After that point, I think people describe the tiers a little differently, but you get into things like, I deleted the partition. So if you delete a partition, the way I typically describe that is you got a library full of books, but you just all of a sudden erase the master record. So all the books are still there. They're all exactly where you left them, but you just have no idea where anything is. And so you have to hire someone, in the data recovery case, it's a program that scans the library to actually go through and inventory everything again, right? And so there's software that you can use to rebuild partitions if you accidentally format your drive. You can also have you install an OS over your drive. And so it starts installing files on top of files, which complicates the issue. Or you can have a mechanical recovery. So, they call it a hard drive crash for a reason. The heads, the moving across the platters crash into the platters, or stick and have stiction on the platters. And so it requires that mechanical level of recovery where, traditionally you need a clean room, open up the drive. And so there's a lot of different steps in data recovery. So our company personally, some of our stores have some equipment, MRT machines or similar, that can control the movement of the heads. So if you have a drive that is failing, but not quite entirely failed, let's say there's, you have a hard drive and there's maybe 4 or 8 mechanical heads inside that are reading the data and only one of them's failing. If you plug it into a computer, you can be churning that drive to pieces. But if you plug that drive into one of these PCI Express cards that is meant for data recovery or an MRT machine, you can control the movement of the heads, and it allows you to sector off that data, right? And so you can do that, or we actually work with real, fully fledged data recovery companies that have clean rooms, that have the whole 9 yards. So it really depends on the level of data recovery that you need, but there's a lot of different options when it comes to computers. When it comes to phones, you're absolutely right. Don't write anything else over it. I think that there are some backup solutions out there, but again, on a phone, it depends whether you factory restored it or whether there's liquid damage and it just doesn't turn on and it needs to be repaired enough to get the data off. So data recovery is, there's no one route. There's a variety of situations which can lead you down multiple paths, and it can dictate what the best course of action is, I guess I should say.
Okay.
Long-winded answer, I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Information is good. We can't get enough nowadays. And I'm just trying to make sure that it's someone like myself can comprehend what you're saying, because it gets a little deep at times. And, my extent of understanding for data recovery in many cases is that, as you stated, you might have something stored on some sort of drive, whether it's a hard disk or flash drive or whatever it is, and then you record new data on top of it, but that old data is still underlying in some way. And in fact, you can have several different entries on top of each other, right? And kind of dig through these layers to get to the stuff that's down in the bottom?
Yeah, absolutely. So a traditional hard drive, the way that it stores data is every bit is this tiny, tiny little piece of section of the drive that can be magnetized in one direction or the other. And that dictates a 1 or a 0, right, in binary. And so when your drive is reading or writing data, it's either pinging every single little piece of the drive and saying, hey, are you a 1 or a 0? Which direction are you magnetized? Or it's remagnetizing it, right? And so what you're referring to is when you can overwrite a drive and then read what it was. So these are, and I'll be honest, I don't know too much about this, but these are complex algorithms that get into trying to understand what it was magnetized to before you changed it, right? It's like writing on a chalkboard. You write a word on a chalkboard, then you erase it once, and you write a word over it. Well, you can kind of still see the word that was there, right? And I think that's similar to the bits and the magnetization of each sector on a drive. You can kind of tell what it was there. But if you write over it a couple times, the more times you write over it, the more it obscures what was previously there. And so that's why I think, DoD standards for wiping drives, I think they typically dictate you write all 1s to a drive, then you write all 0s to a drive, and then you do a random pass that makes it 1s or 0s, right? Or there's like 7 pass guarantees, I'm not really sure. But yeah, that's absolutely the case. So sometimes you can go back and try to tell what direction some of these bits were magnetized, and recover some data that way.
Okay, cool. And Harvey, thanks for pointing that out. You can run a virtual machine on a Mac. And in fact, I'm looking at setting up a virtual machine because I want to be able to do this interview style and use my broadcasting software. And my machine does not have the horsepower to do it. I'm using a MacBook Pro 2016, and it handles this much, and then it's like it doesn't do anymore. So I think a virtual machine might be an answer to that. Now, the other kind of second half of that question, Matt, and I get this a lot from people, is that, understanding that data, just because it's deleted, is not gone, and, there are these steps that people take to override it. If and when I said, okay, I want to sell my phone, I want to sell my Android, my iPhone, my computer, and I've got, things that are important to me that I don't want other people to be able to recover from that drive. Most of us store our banking information, our personal photos, a number of things. Is there really a way to be safe about selling secondhand electronics and knowing that someone who wanted to, or had this time on their hands? I understand that we're not generally targets. It's going to be politicians and celebrities and stuff like that. But if we want to make sure that no one's going to be able to pull our credit card number off that computer, what do you recommend in those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all gets down to a few different factors. It gets down to the device and what type of data that device is storing and how it's storing data, right? There's a difference between phones, there's a difference between regular hard drives, and difference between solid state drives, right? And then there's that percentage of safety that you want to be at, right? Whether you're an individual Joe and you want to be 99.9% sure, or whether this is government data and you need to make sure that no one, is going to ever lay their hands on it. And, so I'll give you some examples. For a phone, as far as I'm aware, typically you can just wipe it, right? There's built-in wipe options. I might not be the most up-to-date on this, but I don't know of too many recovery programs that can recover data from phones that have been wiped properly. Now, we might start getting mentions on our chat here of people that know of software that does that. I personally don't, but if I was selling a phone, I would use the built-in wipe feature and then be done, right? I would disassociate an iPhone, for example. I would disassociate my iCloud ID from the phone to make sure, but I think that's a good built-in way to wipe it. For a computer, I would really want to do a hard format on the drive, maybe install a new OS. And for me, that would be fine, right? So if you're doing a long format, not a quick format, but if you're doing a long format on a drive, somebody's going to have to run data recovery software to pull some stuff off. So, like I mentioned, if you're getting rid of, like I mentioned with the DoD software, there are free programs out there that you can run that kind of do like 3 passes to wipe your drive, right? And so you can be fairly secure if you download one of those programs to wipe your machine. If you really wanted to, you could take the hard drive out and hit it with a hammer. We do that on drives that are bad that we can't access, but we want to wipe the data.
Right. Well, it's going to be hard to sell it after you bang it with the hammer.
True. That would be true. So yeah, it would be very kind of hard to sell if you're taking a hammer to the drive that's inside. But yeah, so I would say for the average user, a phone, you can just go ahead and wipe the phone using the built-in wipe software, right? For a computer, you definitely want to reinstall the operating system, but even besides that, you'd probably want to run some kind of secure method to erase your data. So a lot of them have built-in factory partitions that say erase my data and reinstall Windows, and it will do just that. But anyone who runs advanced data recovery software could probably pull back some of the stuff that you had. I think it would be very unlikely for that to happen. And I think the kind of stuff they'd be pulling back would be remnants of files, not necessarily, logins that you have in your system. But one of the things you definitely want to avoid is just, on a computer, for example, just deleting everything and then giving it to someone. Because there's plenty of places that are cached or in the registry or system files that could be storing your data, right? So maybe you say, hey, I got 100 files on here. I'm just going to select them all, delete them. Let me get rid of this computer. And then you forgot that your browsers are caching all of your passwords for your bank information. And since almost every single one of us reuses the same password across every platform, all they got to do is see one, and then they're into everything you've got. So you definitely want to be wiping computers. But phones, yeah, use the built-in erase feature. I would say you're fine unless you're overly concerned.
Yeah, and again, I have limited knowledge of this. Harvey said, from what I've read, encrypting the phone's data, and this is probably key as well. Encrypting the phone's data and restoring it will completely remove the ability to recover data. And my understanding is that, in particular, when it comes to Apple devices, if you delete something from an iPhone or a Mac and it's encrypted, even if it's recovered without that encryption key, it's not going to be really useful to anyone. And I know this seems like a stretch. Most of us aren't really that worried about this kind of stuff, but I have people ask these questions. And I actually made a video probably about 1.5 years ago or so using a real basic free utility that would recover photos from your computer if you delete it. You've probably seen it before, and right now my name's going to go blank on it, but it's like it's picture or something. You go in and it will scan your entire drive for pictures, text documents, PDFs, that kind of stuff, and I actually got back a lot of stuff that was useful to me that I had accidentally deleted. So I can personally vouch for that, those remnants, being recoverable with a simple delete. That's not obviously very secure. Now I'm going somewhere with this, people, believe it or not. And that's going to be the next thing that I want to bring up, and it's this. And I'm hoping this is going to present, because again, I am just starting to use this particular software. So this should be showing up on the screen. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure. There we go. Okay, so is the government waging an out-of-sight fight with Apple on encryption? This is very current news, and as everyone knows, we've been having a bunch of crazy things happening, or at least we've been hearing about all the crazy things that are happening in the country. And this is in particular reference to the shooting that took place in Texas, where, the consensus is they found the guy who committed the crime. He's dead. They don't think that he acted with anyone else, but supposedly there's kind of a behind the scenes thing going on. And if you remember with the San Bernardino shooter, Apple came out very publicly and said, we are not going to break our encryption and give anyone a backdoor into anything that we make, because once you do that, it kind of, if it exists, then it can be exploited by people that we don't want to get a hold of it, and you immediately think, if you're worried about hackers from overseas getting into your computer or your phone, once this technology is developed and it works, or Apple says, okay, we're going to create this backdoor for the authorities to get into. And I'm, first to say, yes, let's get the bad guys. We need to do that. At the same time, that's going to create a backdoor into the device of anyone, unless we start having different levels of security. If you're a government official, I guess you get BlackBerry. That would probably be the way to go, because they're not that popular and the general public's not going to usually have them. But there's a real controversy going on as to whether or not this is just kind of being used. Like I said, they got the guy. They've determined he acted alone. There's probably nothing to be gained from getting into his phone, and they're actually going after an LG phone that he used to use, you know, apparently before his iPhone. I think he had an iPhone 5 SE or an iPhone SE. What are your thoughts on that whole topic right there?
Yeah, so that's a delicate one because both sides have incredibly valid points, right? And the heart of it gets down to privacy versus security, right? So what should the government be allowed to access? What kind of data surveillance should they have on our devices, our conversation, and what's relevant for national security? So obviously in these extreme cases of terrorism, they want to understand as much as they can about these individuals, what motivated them, who their network was, far beyond whether or not they acted alone, but getting into, who could have supported them, what were the methods that they used to radicalize in these ways, et cetera, et cetera. And, that data can be invaluable for building profiles, right? And so there are these real needs that the government has, but at the same time, where do we draw the line between what they're allowed to listen into and watch and monitor us and what aren't they, right? And then don't even get into the fact that once the government builds these tools, then they're hackable, right? So it came out that the CIA built all these tools into recording data from smart TVs with mics and, backdoors into phones where they could listen in to your mic on your phone, et cetera, et cetera. And then all that got hacked by hackers. So now that these third-party hackers have access to these government surveillance techniques, so it's obviously a whole huge thing, right? And I think everyone has to answer that question for themselves personally of where do we draw the line between security and privacy? I honestly, for me, I don't really have anything to hide. So, I lean more towards security. I lean more towards, the government should be able to monitor all of these things that are relevant for national security and protecting our nation. But at the same time, I feel I'm an individual that has a lot of inherent trust in other people and in our government, right? As soon as you start giving that kind of power to the government and the government becomes, tyrannical, or, you have radicalization of the government, then you start to get into real problems, right? And so that's a national debate, I think, that needs to be playing out on the national stage, right? And I think that's what they said about that case between the government and the FBI and Apple, right? It was playing out on a national stage. And I think that, if anything's brought up by your point here, it's that these things shouldn't be happening secretly behind closed doors. I'm sure that the government would kind of prefer it that way because then they can start doing all of these things without really having that much scrutiny. But it really should be played out on the national stage. The American people should have a collective vote and some type of input on where that balance between privacy and security land.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, like, as you stated, and we've heard this, again, I try to listen to both sides and be reasonable about it, and there are good points on either side. And I think that most of us are not really worried about, like you said, the government could become tyrannical and use these things for, the wrong purposes and everything. My real concern is this: if you make something too easy to compromise, or you create a master key, we have to worry about that master key falling into the wrong hands, and then it becomes a security issue. If and I don't want to name any, no country in general is bad, but there are places in the world that would love to see everything that we do, and in fact, in many cases, they end up getting a hold of that information. And if we have to be protected from that, we have military secrets, we have these government entities, and the moment that you create that backdoor, unless they get some special sort of security, I guess, it's out in the wild, right? And here's an example, something interesting, kind of related. I also wanted to bring this up real quick, and that is just the age of information and surveillance that we're working into. Germany apparently recently banned children's smartwatches over surveillance concerns. And this is something that we heard about back, I think it was about Christmas last year, where they had a manufacturer who was making toys and selling them in the US. And these toys that would record the kids talking would also record their geolocation, their habits, their movement through the houses, their voices, you know, all this other stuff that was going on. And they ended up having some legal issues with that. Well, in Germany, they apparently they're telling parents to destroy these children's smartwatches, and they want to go after the manufacturers and say, hey, you shouldn't have built this thing that records all this information, especially when you're dealing with minors. You know, these aren't even adults, these are kids, and they're tracking everything they do. And it got so serious over there, or at least they were so concerned about it, they said, hey, smash your smartwatch, get rid of it. We can't have these things tracking our kids. And it's insane that, you know, but this is becoming the world that we live in. And I'm going to sound like I'm coming out of the 1920s probably when I say this, but my girlfriend had someone give her a Google, what is it called? The Google Voice deal assistant for your house. You know, you can hook it up to everything and talk to it. And sorry, folks, but Alexa, I don't let in my house. I've already got Siri and Hey Google and all this other stuff that who knows what it's picking up. I won't go too far into that, but I don't really like the idea of every time I talk, there's like this third party just listening. You kind of forget it's there after a while. You know what I mean? And you can, again, be discussing, hey, what's your passcode? Oh, it's this and this. Well, that just got recorded by this other device. And maybe I'm being paranoid. I know. But I think it's at least interesting for us to consider what the future looks like, you know, especially for the next generation as we move into this just integration of electronics into every, you know, 24/7 piece of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that goes straight in line with the information age that we're in and social media and sharing everything. But, you know, getting to your point there, I was actually I was on, I think it was ABC News in Charleston, South Carolina a couple times, and I think I was on NBC in Raleigh, North Carolina, discussing something very similar about the FBI and doing something similar here in the U.S. The FBI came out with a statement that basically warned parents about the prevalence of these sensors in child devices. They referenced the doll that you're talking about, the My Friend Kayla doll that got banned earlier this year in Germany. And they referenced a number of other devices, smart devices and toys that children are getting that record all this kind of data. You know, they ask, hey, what's your favorite color? What's your name? And these microphones and sensors stay on long past you expect them to stay on. And they record all of this data that is especially vulnerable to you since it's your child's information. It's not even your information, right? Whether it's the Amazon, Google, you know, whoever makes these devices, they're still open for attack. So yeah, we were actually on the news a couple times discussing smart toys and the prevalence of smart toys with recording sensors and the vulnerabilities that they have to a variety of hacks. So that's a real thing.
Man, it's nuts. You know, this whole Internet of Things deal, it's like pretty soon your shirt's going to have some kind of smart technology built into. I'm sure there's something out there already, you know, that connects to.
The problem with those Internet of Things is that the budgets are so low for these devices. They're not computers, so they don't get patched. They don't get security updates, and it's much easier to hack, right? The example that I gave when I was interviewed a few times on TV was I have a wireless slow cooker. So I have a slow cooker that I can access wirelessly with my smartphone. I don't think I've ever done it, right? But I'm not going to be plugging in my slow cooker and updating it. And I don't think the people who were designing this $30 slow cooker were the world's top security minds. So I would imagine it would be very easy to hack this slow cooker, take it over, and then, you know, it's just there. You know, it's not like a computer that gets Microsoft security patches on the second Tuesday of every month, right? The slow cooker is going to be hacked forever. And that's an IP address that can be used for, you know, denial of service attacks or whatever it is you want to do. Slow cooker doesn't have too many sensors on it. They might like to be able to tell how I like my food burnt or whatever, right? But if they hack onto your TV, your smart TV that, you know, is audio controlled, then boom, they got a mic there that they can record. And so, you know, it's hard to talk about this stuff without sounding a little bit paranoid, but at the same time, these are real concerns and these are real devices that are getting hacked. You know, there was the Hello Barbie doll that Mattel released in 2005 that got met with 2015, that got met with a lot of concern from parents and privacy right groups. And so that one I think got shut down, but then very similar toys got released. right? So whether it's Internet of Things with all these devices that aren't getting updated, they're easily hackable, or whether they're things, devices that are monitoring your child, right? That's an extra pain point sensitivity for parents. It's a real concern that there's a higher prevalence of sensors in these devices that are coming out, and especially the low cost devices that don't necessarily have the same backbone of security that the higher devices do. And even the higher devices, right? Anyone can get hacked. You get these massive hacks that hack, half of Americans' information with, Equifax or, any of these huge companies can be hacked. And if they can be hacked, I'm sure the guy making the wireless slow cooker can be hacked. So
yeah, definitely. And it's funny. You mentioned something I hadn't even considered, and that is the lack of security based on the price point. Do you remember bluejacking, like back in, I think it was the 90s or early 2000s? So you could take a Bluetooth phone, and if someone else had their phone turned on, the default for every Bluetooth device is 4 zeros. It always has been. They haven't changed it in decades, and you could actually basically hack into someone's phone and control it, send messages to it, and freak them out. And we thought it was funny and entertaining, but at the same time, it's a very good demonstration of how little security something like a Bluetooth system has in it. Only within the last few years, I've been noticing that when you connect your Bluetooth device to your car, there's generally a code you have to confirm. Well, it hasn't always been like that. You used to be able to just say, okay, I see JBL system, connect, boom. Now you can control someone's stereo, which can be helpful if you have loud music playing on your block. You just jump onto their thing and kill it, or turn it all the way down. But that hasn't changed, even though we know that it's an issue. And yeah, I am going to be the one that sounds paranoid, and I try not to, because every time I bring this up to anyone who's younger than me, they didn't grow up without this technology. So, when we look at what we grew up with, and we told our parents, oh, microwave's not going to give you cancer. Don't worry about it. Everyone has one. And now everyone says, oh, don't worry, use your fingerprint to unlock your phone, your face recognition, no big deal. And I'm going to be the skeptic and say, I got a passcode. I'm good with that. Unless it's been around for like 20 years and we have some sort of something that guarantees that that's not going to be a concern.
I think that stuff can absolutely be hacked. I mean, I think that the hacks that have gone on in the last couple of years show us that no information is private, right? I think the problem is it's kind of hard to exist in 2017 without giving out that information. So, it's all a balance, do I think it's a real possibility that my fingerprint data, my face scan data can be hacked? Absolutely. I absolutely think that is a real possibility, right? Because I already have a 50% chance of my social security number, and everything else got hacked from the Equifax hack. I mean, these are real possibilities, but what's the alternative? To not use a smartphone, to not apply for credit, to not, it's the world that we live in. And so I do understand that my privacy is at risk, but it's the price you pay to play, right? That's what you got to do to join the game in the world.
Be part of what. Well, and here's something, Wayne Taylor says any security is only good as the user. And I want to add to that, any security is also only as good as the person you give the information to. I remember way back, I was getting my cable hooked up at my house, and they asked me for my social security number. I said, what do you need my social security number for? To turn on my cable. And they fought me all the way up to like 3 levels of management. And I go, look, you're not going to run a credit check to connect my cable. If you are, then let's go about this differently. No, we just use it to identify you. Well, why don't we use something else? I'll give you a PIN code, whatever. And would you believe that when I got to the right person, they said, oh, we don't need your social. We'll just take your your last 4 digits, which again, anytime you log into anything, when you give them the last 4 digits, that's all they need to identify you. So I wish people would get that. They go, oh, we don't want the full social, because then someone could commit fraud. Well, if you have those last 4 digits, you might as well have my password, because you go to the recovery option, say, here's my last 4 digits. You looked at whatever profile I have, my pet's my first pet's name and all this kind of stuff. And so yes, the user and whatever it is you happen to be using, Harvey says Nokia Symbian OS had a very fun Bluejack app. I would love to see that in action. And we were talking on another live stream that I did about Windows phones. Do you remember those? I know it kind of faded into obscurity a long time ago. And someone asked me, like, what was your favorite phone? And I got to say, to this day, my Nokia 1020 with the 41 megapixel camera, I love that phone. I love the operating system. I love the live tiles. They failed miserably in the app market, or developers didn't want to do anything for Windows, or they joined the game too late, whatever. They're gone. I know they're coming out with a Windows 10 phone, but I wanted to add to that, Nokia made some of the most durable phones ever. I mean, those things were monsters. They said that when the first Nokia fell to the ground, that's what caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, because of the cloud that it produced. What do you think? I mean, obviously, I know that you're a fan of Apple. You're using an iPhone 10 now, but looking back at all the, in context of when they were released at the time, what has been like your favorite phone?
So my answer is going to be pretty boring because I've kind of been on the iPhone train for quite a while.
Okay.
I have plenty of technicians we have like a chat between however many employees we have, 10 of the stores that we run. And I can't tell you how many times they've gotten into debates and conversations about the best phone, the best OS, and it's just these heated battles more than anything else. So I've always been an iPhone guy from the beginning. To me, it's just usability, right? To me, the hardware has varied across the board. I think that Android probably has plenty more features that are available, right? There's so many great devices, but to me, it's just the usability, right? It's the fact that everything just works on the iPhone. It's not what it does, it's how it does it, right? It's just, it flows, it's nice, it's simple. There's a reason that a child and everyone's grandparents can pick it up and for the most part navigate it, right? It's just simple and it flows. And so I'll take that any day over being able to add on some extra features that I don't necessarily need. But I think remember the 1020. I think one of my employees had it, and I do remember the durability boasts, but I think he broke that thing like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it might have been that he was just not the best at repairing his own phone, but I think he fixed that phone, every other week while we had him employed here. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay. So
everybody breaks any phone, so that's.
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate so far. I think I've broken one screen, and when I was in the shop repairing phones, it just blew my mind at the repeat customers, because it's here it comes again. It's that iPhone, whatever, or this phone. And you could, the person's come back 7 times in a year.
We've had them come back same day.
What's that?
We've had them come back same day, walk out of the shop, and then you see them drop it on concrete right as they walk out the door. I mean, yeah.
Do you guys have a discount for parking lot damage? A lot of people ask that one.
We give the bleeding heart discount,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That works. Yeah, and we always try to do, it's difficult to for people to put themselves in our position, obviously, regardless of what happened to your phone and how soon after the repair, it still costs us the same amount for the part and the labor. But at the same time, my rationale here is that, I do try to put myself in the customer's shoes. And at the very least, we know this. There is 0 cost of acquisition associated with a repeat customer. They came to you once. We already know what to expect. They know they'll be in and out. We don't have to spend advertising or try to network to get them to come in. So if someone says, hey, I was here last week, my phone broke, I legitimately feel bad for you, and I want to help you out any way that I can. So if I can cut the labor down a bit, I will. Obviously, we have no control over the cost of the parts. That is what it is. So
yeah, we absolutely believe in the customer experience as well. We're here to serve the customer. We're here to fix their devices. And yeah, I mean, I think most people understand that if they drop it again and break it again, it's all on them. They should pay full price again. But we are here to deliver that experience. Just like you said, we feel bad for them. We take their concerns under advisement, right? I think if you're an ice cream shop owner and you give somebody ice cream and the kid drops it immediately on the floor, I think they tend to, here's another scoop for you. It's the same kind of thing. We're here to provide that experience, and we just want, we want what's fair for us, but we're also here to try to treat our customers in the best possible way that we can. You know, we honor warranties for longer than our claims state routinely. You know, we're here to provide a great service. I think a lot of repair shops are the same. I think some aren't, and I think they're going to face tougher times as time goes on. But you know, we believe very much in doing business focused on the customer experience and providing that positive environment for them, so that, you know, they get what consumers should get and should expect.
Right. And I think that that's one of the biggest, and people do come onto my channel quite often and ask about getting into the phone repair business. And, you know, if they had asked me 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I'd say yes. You know, do your market research, make sure there's no one else on the block or within a 5 or 10 square mile area, and do it. But now I like to kind of also throw in or reinforce the idea that, yeah, if you want to be a technician and fix phones, that's great, or run a phone repair business, but you also want to be someone who deals with the public and someone who understands that a lot of times when it comes down to competition, it's going to be the person with the people skills that wins. And this is a big transition. And Matt and I kind of talked about this before the live stream started, and that is that the landscape has changed. And if you think of it, I was going to use big cable as an example, but we're kind of going back in the direction that we came from with them. You know, it used to be the cable company was all there was. And once we started getting the internet and satellite and everything, and they had competition, they couldn't just say we're coming between 8 and 5 tomorrow. You know, we started saying that doesn't work for us. And they kind of had to increase their customer service. And now they're repealing laws that allow them to consolidate these big businesses. And we're going to go back to one provider. And if they can't monopolize media, you know, they can't monopolize just the cable business because we have other options. Now they want to monopolize the internet. And I'll get to that in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But one thing that I like to tell people is, yeah, as a technician, a lot of times you have the mindset of, I'm going to be working with devices. But the bigger picture is you're going to be working with devices and people, because if you aren't, the person down the street who has that skill, or who has someone in the front office in the lobby that can deal with people and answer the phones, they're going to be able to close that deal, you know, when someone's shopping around. If they get a good feeling, a good experience when they're dealing with, you know, face to face, it's going to be different. And, you know, back in the mid 2000s, there were quite a few markets that had no competition. And we would hear stories all the time where people went to a phone repair shop, they were treated very rudely, and they were basically told, hey, it's my business. If you don't like it, you know, you can hit the road. And there wasn't a lot of options for those people. Well, now, as we see that the market has just blown up as far as independent stores opening. And in the beginning, of course, we see that there's lots of competition and saturation. And then we start to see people who don't really understand the whole game just kind of fall off after a short period of time, or having a lot of negative customer experiences. So that definitely thins out the crowd at some point. It's kind of going that direction now. And especially with these phones that are becoming more difficult than just pulling out a few screws and plugging something in to repair. You know, it's definitely got more complicated and seems to be trending that way.
Yeah, I think that I mean, we're in a technical industry. So fixing phones, fixing computers, you know, you traditionally think of as geek and techie, and not necessarily people that have people skills. And so I think that's why, you know, that's somewhat a stereotype, you know, somewhat not. Stereotypes come for a reason. But I think that traditionally in this industry, yeah, you know, when people lack options, they go to whoever can fix their device, regardless of the experience that they have. But at the end of the day, we're in the service industry, right? And so what we should be providing is we're providing a service to the customer. It tends to be a technical repair service, and technicians tend to not always have the best possible customer service, right? But I think that's changing with the market, right? I think that the successful companies know and understand that we're in the customer service industry, and we should be providing superior customer service. So to me, you know, there is no room for a technician these days that cannot provide that level of service. I would not hire one at my company. I would not take one on as a franchisee. You know, that's an entry level skill, is to be able to provide a certain level of customer service, because that's how I believe these companies should be run. But in addition, what you mentioned was, you know, there's It used to be you could open up a shop anywhere and just make a killing, but now it's getting harder to get into the industry. And so I think one of the questions that you were kind of getting around to was, would you still recommend opening up a shop, right? And in my opinion, there's still plenty of room in the industry, but you're going to need to do it with more sophistication than you used to. And to me, what that means is you should really investigate, become part of a franchise, or go in with an existing company that has shown their ability to make it work, right? Because marketing plays a huge role in this business. You know, setting up your store, being able to manage your inventory, using your systems and processes in a certain way to get the job done. You know, there's a lot that goes into running a successful business when there is competition on a lot of different corners. So I think that there's a lot of room left in this industry. I think it's consolidating, as you mentioned, right? So industries go through this, you know, contract and expand period where there's, you know, it contracts as the industry consolidates, and then as somebody innovates, you know, Netflix innovates streaming TV, and all of a sudden you got Hulu and Amazon Video and, you know, Apple TV, and the whole world's expanding again until, you know, the market consolidates. But I think very much in the cell phone repair industry, it's consolidating. I think almost everyone who knows a shop, owns a shop, knows and recognizes that. And I think it's just getting to a place where the industry is maturing and kind of taking on it's taking a step, I think, in the right direction, but I think it's going to make a lot of shop owners maybe need to adapt to that change for better or worse. But I think that we can all make it and survive if we can find a way to work together and network together and work together towards a common goal.
I couldn't agree more, and I find it so entertaining that you use Netflix as an example, because this is going to sound bad, but you remember when Blockbuster came in and put all the mom and pop video rental stores out of business? I don't know if you. It was quite a while back. I mean, I'm probably.
I don't know if I remember Blockbuster taking over. I certainly remember the Blockbuster days and my Blockbuster membership.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go way back here and date myself like I always do. But, you know, if you looked in the 80s and 90s, you know, anyone could get into the video rental business. People were renting VHS tapes. And then Blockbuster just kind of came in with their selection and their nice stores and their huge bankroll and put all these small businesses out. You know, people would have to pay $60, $75 for a single copy of a movie. It's not like you get these movies on consignment. You know, it costs real money. So if something got released, you know, if Terminator got released on video, if you're a mom and pop shop, you can't go out and get a dozen copies. You get like 2 or 3. We used to have to reserve videotapes, you know, to rent them. Well, Blockbuster came in and kind of solved that problem for the consumers. And at the same time, they just wiped out all these mom and pop shops. And I thought it was just so ironic that, you know, like a decade or two, you know, a little more than a decade later, Netflix came in and pretty much was the nail in the coffin for Blockbuster, because we started getting these on-demand services and people like, I'm not going to go drive to the store, man. I click a button and download it. Just kind of like what Napster sort of did. Well, really what iTunes did to the music industry, you know, as far as people buying records and stuff like that. But a lot of valid points there, Matt. If there's anything that is associated with this plan that you're talking about that you want to bring up or link to, or while I think of it, let's get a link to your website so we can share that with anyone who might be on the East Coast and interested in your services, or maybe is looking for a position as a tech in one of your shops.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just computerrepair.com.
Okay, well, that's easy enough. I'm going to jump over the comments here real quick. And by the way, everyone, if you're watching here, do me a favor, click the like button. Be sure to hit subscribe while you're here, and the bell notification. The weird thing about YouTube is if you want to see this stuff coming up, subscribing alone won't get you the notifications. You have to click that little bell icon to let you know when we're doing a live stream or publishing. And if you do that, it'll be awesome. You'll make my day. I want to jump over to the comments here real quick. Wayne had said, how many routers have password admin or admin password? And I changed mine eventually, but not by very much. Ericsson 3, we were talking about favorite and durable phones. Ericsson, man, Sony Ericsson. I remember those like way back in the day. Let's see. Who has better tech, Matt or Mike? Can we have a fix off? Well, Harvey, I don't know that would be a great idea, because Matt is actually in the business. What's that?
Can I name a spokesman? Isn't that what they used to do with those epic wars? You choose your warrior to battle for you. Can I do something like that?
Exactly. I think I'm going to do that. Can I choose from anyone who I've trained for phone repair and have them represent me? And Matt is actually running a phone repair company. So I don't know if that would be a fair contest for either of us, really. You know, I make videos and train people, but I get to take my time and don't have to worry about stresses. But hey, I'll tell you what, I think that if you are going to be running a chain of repair stores, Matt is going to be much more the authority on that than I am. And both of us, again, we were talking about this before the stream. We're both into other areas of phone repair beyond just, you know, being a tech. And I'll tell you right now, I don't fix phones 8 hours a day. I may not be qualified to enter that contest, but yeah, if there were such a thing to compete for prize money, I could come up with a few people that could represent me probably.
I had some speedy phone repair times back in the day. I forget what they were, but I think I was pretty proficient on the iPhone 4S. I could blow through that in a good chunk of a good.
I'll tell you what, that would be one of my favorites because so many people hate that phone. And once we did a few and got it, you know, got it down, I love that. Everyone, even competing businesses, would send us their iPhone 4Ss because they just didn't want to deal with it and they felt that there was so much liability. But yeah, you know, friendly competition is always fun. I'm not sure how that would happen. Of course, being in Hawaii, Matt's probably much more calm and collected and steady-handed than I am. I got to tell you, I'm at the point now where I'm wearing reading glasses for a lot of this stuff because that's just starting to hit me now. Real quick, I do want to bring up a couple things. Matt, I know that I said this would be about an hour, so if you have to jump off at 3, that's okay. You're definitely welcome to hang around. There's a couple things I wanted to make sure that we covered today before I end this little thing here. And there are 2 things that I feel very passionate about beyond phone repair. One of them involves phone repair. It's the right to repair, but one of them also involves pretty much everything in our daily lives, and that is net neutrality, which is, you know, little by little, let's just put it this way, it is under attack right now. This guy whose face I am just tired of looking at. I don't know, there's something about it that I don't like. But the FCC just repealed a 42-year-old rule that blocks broadcast media mergers. And why this is important is because if you can imagine one big company coming in and buying up every broadcaster there is in the US. Now, we know that, you know, whether you watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC or anything else like that, these broadcasters are influenced by their advertisers, and they won't talk about things like net neutrality, and they won't talk about things like right to repair because their advertisers don't want them to do that. Well, once in a while, we get to see 2 different sides of an issue. We get to see, you know, the left and the right, or the conservative and the liberal, and, you know, any of 2 positions. It's too bad we don't hear more than 2. But if this continues, and the reason that this law was put into place in the beginning was so that everyone would have a voice, so that we as American citizens could hear different arguments and make our decisions based on those things. Now, I understand we have the internet, which helps a lot, but we still have a lot of voters who watch the mainstream media. And with this rule going away, there's nothing to stop someone with enough money from buying up every television channel that you have access to and telling you their side of the story. So this is really discouraging. And, you know, it's just little by little, we see this stuff continue to happen. They're actually planning to have a vote on net neutrality like the day before Thanksgiving, where they think that everyone else is too occupied with other things to worry about what's going on with their legislators. And I will put links down in the video description for websites that you can go to get the information you need. There's actually a text message that you can send now, fill out a form, and tell your representatives what you think about net neutrality. The real sad thing is that it doesn't really, I mean, I want to encourage people to do that. And at the same time, I'm sitting on the sidelines watching how what we say doesn't seem to be that important anymore. You know, it's like, hey, I'm opposed to this, and I tell my senator that, but I'm not paying my senator, you know, somehow under the table $1 million a year to represent my interests. And it's a real sad thing. So we need the most voices that we can get together for both of these issues. The other one, and don't let me cut you off, Matt, if you want to add anything to this. This is all about hearing your opinion as well.
No, absolutely. I'll let you continue. I did, during our conversation, I did get a New York Times notification that said the U.S. Department of Justice is announcing that they are going to sue to block the AT&T Time Warner merger.
Right.
So that seems like that's going to be an up and coming thing. But no, I'll let you continue. You've got more on that regard than myself.
I certainly hope that that is a trend that begins, because you know, I think all of us believe in democracy, and we understand that capitalism is what drives us to innovate and to advance as a nation. And at the same time, you know, there's a point where someone is so big and so powerful that they make all the rules, and we don't want that, because that will ultimately stifle innovation and evolution, you know, within the tech world. I'm gonna, because it is 3, let me get these chats real quick. I do want to put one little update on right to repair, and then if you have to go, I'll let you go. Like I said, this ends up happening quite often. I run a little bit longer than I plan to. Wayne Taylor, a bit far from Hawaii, Western Australia. Yo, Matt, is there any software out there that is a direct source for Apple iCloud unlocks? I'm going to let you have that one, because I've answered this many times before, and my answer is always the same, but maybe you can add to that one.
So I'd love to hear your answer as well. Mine is no, not to my knowledge. As far as I'm aware, I think there's like one version of the iOS that had some bug that it could be unlocked if you had that very specific version. It might have even been device dependent as well. I've also heard rumors about, you know, reballing NAND chips and doing board level stuff that frankly I don't have too much experience with. But for the most part, no, I don't think there's any software out there that can switch off the iCloud locks.
Yeah, that's my thing is this, and I understand that there are legitimate situations where people come into possession of devices that are locked out by a cloud. We know that the majority of the time that's not, you know, that's not okay. It's not legit. But once in a while it happens, and I say that because I am an example. I had to replace a device for a customer, and they said, go ahead and keep my old device, and unfortunately, it is cloud locked now. And the thing was, they changed their cloud credentials, so even the customer, who I still have contact with, is unable to remove the cloud from that device. So I'm stuck with an iPad that I shouldn't have restored. I should have just added my cloud account, but he goes, oh, go ahead and restore it, no problem. And now it's locked. So, but the short answer to your question there, Adam, is, you know, to the best of my knowledge, almost always no. There was apparently a slight exception on 11.1. Gosh, I think it was 11.1, or it might have been 11.0. So there was kind of a back door that someone figured out. And in a previous live stream, I've got a link. If I can remember, I'll put a link in the description. But like Matt said, there's one specific version where if you have two-factor authentication set up on your iPhone, there is a way, in fact, to bypass that iCloud. I would assume that once the phone is updated, it will probably put the cloud back on, because that's usually on the Apple server itself. They have information that ties that specific serial number to the cloud. So we have sometimes people come in and you can use the phone until it gets updated or until it gets restored, and then it puts the cloud back on. So you've got to do that from their end. And you did ask for a software solution. So I'm going to say no for the most part, other than that hack, which is basically a backdoor. And I think it's been fixed in 11.1.2, but I don't remember reading anything about it. Also, as far as removing the components inside of the phone and transferring new ones over to bypass the iCloud, you are looking at a crazy amount of labor, risk, skill. You know, long story short, I certainly wouldn't attempt it. They have places overseas that do this kind of stuff, but yeah, if it's your phone, good luck on finding a solution. If someone's trying to sell you an iCloud locked phone, or you bought one, try to get your money back, because usually you're going to end up running into a brick wall one way or another. Wayne says media has way too much power these days. Their ability to turn a lie into the truth is amazing. My ability to not just create a podcast or a live stream that's all about politics, I think, is amazing. But no, it's so tough, you know, to refrain from really diving deep into this stuff. And one of the sad things about it is that now YouTube really doesn't want people talking about controversial topics. I hope that that will change, but right now they're penalizing people for even mentioning anything that advertisers might say, well, we don't want to be involved on either side of that issue. So that kind of sucks. Wayne had stated earlier that if you're in the repair business and you're not doing micro soldering, you're going to have a difficult future. And I would have to agree with that. Reballed many an iPhone NAND and never unlocked an iCloud. Reball NAND normally to upgrade customers' phone memory. Yeah, there's like 4 different components that, at least to my knowledge, that need to be moved over from the iCloud locked phone, and you've got to have a donor, and you've got to have a programmer to put the matching IMEI. I mean, it's just, you might as well buy another phone for the most part. Of course, nowadays we're looking at $1,000 phones, so someone might justify that. For anyone who hasn't been on here before, if you have, you already know what my my other interests are beyond just phone repair. But for anyone who's coming here for the first time, I also want to make sure that everyone knows about this, because you don't hear about this, like I said, on the news. Nobody talks about this. Real clear policy. Again, I will add these links down below the video description. But long story short, we are still fighting for the right to repair. And the big challenge here is that so much of what we use nowadays has software built into it in one way or another, and manufacturers are using this. They're using copyright law to say, no, it's not okay for you to repair anything because you'll be infringing on our copyright laws. And this particular article is saying that what we need to do is take a look at the DMCA and update it, basically, because it's not realistic to go into the future saying no one can ever repair anything that has software built into it. It's insane. We're not just talking about phones and tablets and computers. We're talking about farm equipment, medical equipment, things that we rely on to survive, where the manufacturers in many cases are fighting against our ability to repair them and saying, no, if you have a $500,000 tractor that you need to get fixed so that you can harvest your crops, you need to come to us. You're not able to fix that yourself because we're not going to allow you to have access to the parts or the software or whatever it is. We hear a lot within the phone repair community about this when it comes to the devices that we deal with, but it goes much further than that. And it's a real scary future where you go and buy anything. You buy a car and you're not allowed to change the tire or a door handle or anything, because it all ends up getting tied in somehow to this copyright law. Hopefully that will get updated. I don't want to give a dim outlook of the future, but it doesn't look encouraging at this point. There just isn't the level of awareness that we need to have on this. If you repair phones for a living, you know all about right to repair, but you ask someone off the street who uses these devices all day long and relies on them, and they really don't generally have any idea that this fight, that this battle is going on, that we keep trying to push for. Hey, we should be able to fix our phones when they're out of warranty, or when there's not an Apple store or a Samsung store or a Windows store, or anything right down the street. So I encourage everyone to check that out. It's righttorepair.org. You can get some information on who you can talk to. I know it's difficult. It seems like an uphill battle, but hopefully enough of us can tell our representatives that, hey, if you want us to vote for you next time, you need to get behind this. You need to start taking a look at it from the consumer side. All right, I have gone on quite a bit. Matt, if there's anything you want to add, talk about, by all means, throw it in there. I really appreciate you coming on. This is a lot of fun. We got more guests coming in the future, and if you ever want to jump on here again, by all means, drop me a line. I've actually learned here quite a bit just talking to you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. It was a pleasure to be on, and it was I agree, it was a great conversation.
Awesome. All right, everyone. I'm going to leave the chat on here and keep this going for a little bit. There are a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. Matt, you're welcome to stay. If you got to get back to work, I understand you're a CEO, president, so you got lots of responsibilities, but I'm definitely not chasing you off by any means. I did want to get into some articles here. Let me pull this up real quick.
I think I do have to bounce, but again, I appreciate you having me, and good luck with the rest of your chit chat here.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks. Bye.
Talk to you later. All right, guys. So I think I have gone over most of the material, but there were a couple other things here, and that was going to be this, which is really funny because I keep seeing this picture pop up and people saying it's them. So you know how that happens on the internet? People will say, oh, look at what I did, and then it ends up being someone else. Well, this picture came out quite a while ago, and I have seen it. Now it's on someone's Twitter account, and it says, spent all my savings on the new iPhone 10, and it's already broken. My life is completely ruined right now. Well, please don't spend all of your savings on a phone. But at the same time, I actually had someone who was from a repair store and posted this and said that the customer had brought this phone into them, which is easy enough to imagine that happening. But I've also seen several different people claim that this is their photograph and their phone. This is someone from Twitter who said it was his. Looks a bit like Keanu Reeves, actually, and I'm not sure if that's true or not. But yeah, by all means, if you have an iPhone 10, if you haven't already invested in some sort of protection plan, this is one of the phones where I would recommend you consider it, because that back panel right there, if you don't have Apple Care or any other type of insurance, you're looking at $549. That is considered an other repair outside of screen repair. So that is going to cost you some money. I mean, crazy piece of glass, but it was pretty obviously designed so that if it breaks, you are going to be out a lot of money. It could be a brand new iPhone skin. That's great. You know what? I would love to see a case that looks like that on the back. That would be hilarious. Don't know how many Apple customers who have been told at Apple Repair Center it's impossible to recover your data that is water damage. I've done it. Well, that's the one that we know, right? And here's another thing that would be nice to be able to communicate to a large audience, and that is, just because Apple told you that you can't do something with your device, I mean, how do we reach these people, Wayne? This is my question. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've had people come into one of our stores, and it doesn't happen as much now as it did in the past, but they would say, oh, you guys can actually fix this? I wish I had known about you years ago with all the phones that I broke. And like you said, you know, water damage, yeah, it can be difficult, but I have fixed many, many water damaged phones before. And to just give up, and what typically happens is, and I don't want to pick on Apple because I think any manufacturer kind of acts the same way. They don't want to touch it because, one, there's a good chance that something could go wrong later on, and number two, they can't sell you another phone or give you a refurbished unit, and they take that other phone in when they swap it out for you, send it back, see what they can salvage, and that is how they maximize their profits. So while we understand the motivation, it sucks for the computer and it sucks for us because you're taking business away. You know, if you can't handle the repair, send it to someone who can, but obviously that's going to be a tough one to convince them to do. That would be an awesome skin. We can fix the back glass of the iPhone 8 and 10 now. It's hard but possible. Alien Fix, are you actually getting a hold of pre-assembled housings that have the glass on it, or are you removing the housing and replacing it? I would love to know that one, because with the camera being welded on from the outside, I know that you have to pretty much completely break the glass. I haven't done one myself, but you've pretty much got to break that back panel to get it off, right? So how do you then remove the camera and put it on over the panel? I'd love to see that. In fact, if you want to make a video, let me know. I'd be happy to feature it on here. I'd love to show people that process. You can't, I'm banned from Apple forums after telling people what can be repaired when Apple says it can't. I was just talking to someone recently. Where did I write it down? I just typed this out recently. Oh, I know what it was. There was a comment asking about, if you remember, there's something called the Gecko Toolkit, and it allows you to recover the 4-digit passcode off of an iPhone 4, iPod Touch 4th generation, 1st generation iPad, and a number of other devices. And I made the mistake of going onto an Apple forum and trying to help out for a while. And then someone asked, hey, you know, I forgot my passcode. How can I get it? And the forum's answer was, you have to restore your phone. That's it. The data's gone. And I said, no, it's not. All you have to do is bypass the disabled screen and recover the passcode. And I got banned quickly after that. And if you are familiar with Jessa Jones, she is the micro soldering mom who goes on Apple's forums regularly and tries to give people very simple solutions to their problems, such as clean out the lightning port on your iPhone so that it will start charging again. And they will delete your comment and eventually ban you for contributing that information. Now, I understand it's their backyard, and they don't want anyone there who's going to offer them competition. I understand that. And at the same time, just the level of brainwashing that must go on for these mods to go in and just kick people off because they said something. You know, it's like Apple is the word, and that's it. And you say anything against the word and you're kicked. It's pretty sad, especially when there's a simple solution like digging the lint out of your lightning port, or telling people that you can't replace your charge port on a phone. I mean, come on. Jessa and Mark both got banned as well. You know what? I think we should probably have a competition and see who can actually get their IP address banned. You know, just start making multiple profiles and going on there and giving people good advice, and see how long it takes for Apple to ban you when you try to help one of their customers by doing something, you know, by offering a service or a suggestion or recommendation that Apple isn't okay with. They're losing credibility, don't you think, at a certain point? But yeah, they aren't even Apple employees. That's what I'm saying, is that I understand if Apple's position is, hey, this is our forum, this is not what we want. But you see the loyalty from these mods coming on and saying, how dare you do this? And they're probably not even on the payroll. They probably give them, you know, level 1, level 2 badge or something ridiculous like that. And it definitely goes to their head. Man, if we could figure out that, if we could figure out how to create the loyalty, I've said this for a long time. One thing that Apple does well is create loyal customers. If you can figure out how to do that for your store, your product, your service, whatever it is that you have, you will be rich for sure, because it is it's about as close to religion, I think, as it gets. All right, folks. Hey, thanks a lot for joining me once again. I am doing a new segment now called 10 Minutes of Tech. I'm kind of trying to figure out, for people who don't really know what we're all about here, that want to visit my channel and just get an update on what's going on, you know, within the last week or last few days. I'm trying to kind of, you know, just smash that down to a 10-minute segment and hopefully get some people to come in to the live chat. I hope that you'll check that out and give me any suggestions that you might have. I actually got a good one already, and that was to transition between topics. So I'm going to be updating that, but I'll still be doing the live stream on Mondays at 2 p.m. I hadn't thought about something, and that is that this Thursday will be Thanksgiving. So I really don't think that I'll be able to do the 6 p.m. live stream that I started last week. I know a lot of people wanted to be able to come on here when they weren't at work. I can't really do that this week because of Thanksgiving. At least I don't think so. So it's probably not going to be on the schedule, but I'll definitely, oh, and another thing is that next Monday, I am covering at a phone repair store. So I'll be working in the store. So I don't know how that's going to work. I want to be able to live stream it without boring people to death, because obviously I'll be doing work and dealing with customers and stuff like that. So if you have any suggestions for that, by all means, put that down in the video description. Outside of that, 10 minutes of tech, 2 live streams a week after this week, because obviously the holiday is going to be a thing, and hopefully Christmas doesn't fall on like a Thursday. I need to look that up. Again, thank you all for joining me. I'm going to take off, and I will see you soon.